Travis Elkins, and I will be creating a video showing how to use Ranked. We'll be focusing on some very basic usage. If you're not familiar with Ranked, as you can see, this is its website. It's a drop-in service that you can use to gamify your app. There are lots of benefits which you can read about on our blog or elsewhere on the internet. So we'll get started here in a minute. I will sign in. You can also visit us on Twitter. You can follow us there, or you can follow me. You can send us any messages, questions, feedback, whatever. All right, so once you get an account, you create a game. We will create a test game. There we have our game down here. We also have a webhook URL, webhook secret. These are used for communicating back to your application from Ranked. We'll set that up for our test game here in a minute. I should mention that Ranked is API first. The idea is that once you have a game set up and configured, everything can be done via API. We do have an administrative GUI that you can use. It has all of your resources over on the left, and you can go into each one and view and of course do all your basic CRUD functionality. We're going to come back here from time to time perhaps, but right now let's just go back here. I'm going to turn to an app called Tinkerwell, which lets us run some of our code. Behind this I have a simple brand new Laravel application, and I haven't brought in our PHP SDK. The PHP SDK is a very light, simple wrapper around all the various API endpoints that we'll be using. So for this example, we're going to think about a simple scenario. We'll imagine that we have a sales application. We want to create an achievement, and that achievement is earned when our users close 10 sales or more. I've already created the game. So now when you connect to Ranked API, you need to have your API token, and you need to have the game ID that you want to be interacting with. So we'll get that real quick. We'll go back here. The game ID is listed for each game. We'll copy that, paste that right in, and the token is something that you can take care of here. We'll just create a test token. Now we have that once. Once we close this, it won't be shown again. So let's go in and paste it there. Now we're ready to proceed. Now, this may change in the future. We may create a standard leaderboard by default, but that's not done at the moment. So I'm going to quickly create a standard leaderboard. Now, there are different kinds of leaderboards in Ranked. And a standard leaderboard is one, and you can only have one, but it's one that is automatically updated whenever achievements are earned. Achievements have points associated with them, and each time one's earned by what we call a player, one of your users, then they'll get those points, and that leaderboard is updated automatically. So it will always be up to date with the latest rankings and the current score. And that's done for on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, and of course all time. So we're going to run this, and then we'll see over on the right hand side the output, which is the API response wrapped up in our little SDK. So here we have our new leaderboard that's created. We can see it's type standard. Like I say, you can decide how you want to order when it comes to rankings, and how you want to consider the scores when you're seeing if a new score is better or worse. So there's a little bit of flexibility there that should address any needs that you might have. All right. You'll also notice that the leaderboard took two parameters, a custom ID and a name. For most of the resources in Ranked, you'll see the same kind of thing. Each resource, almost every resource, will have a custom ID and a name. These need to be unique for that given resource for each of your games. So it's a way for you to recognize what it is. The one should be a light URL friendly name or ID. The other is perhaps more friendly, something that you might display, especially in the case of achievements, something you might display to your users. Ranked is action-based. What that means is we care about what your users do. Each thing that they do, like they close a sale, they post a comment, they submit a blog, these different things, anything that a user can do is considered an action. These actions have to be defined and stored in Ranked. And then when you have everything set up, as your users use your application, you just report these activities in terms of the player and the action that they've performed. So for our sample, and again, we're going to create an achievement that is awarded when the player or the user has closed 10 sales. So we want to have an action where they close a sale. So here we're going to create an action. It's going to have a custom ID of closed sale, and the name is close a sale. Very easy. I'm going to run this. We'll see the response. Now we have a close sale action. I'll comment this out so we don't run it again. Now the next two pieces, it may seem a little bit much for what we're doing here. For such a simple exercise, this is too much. But if you think about it as we go through it, you'll see that there's a great deal of flexibility that gives you quite a bit of power in terms of defining all sorts of interesting criteria for a single achievement to be made. Achievements are awarded, I should say, when their criteria are met. Every achievement has to have one criteria group, and that criteria group will have one or more criteria that belong to it. A criteria group can also nest criteria groups, and the way that the criteria are examined or processed is flexible depending on what you define for your criteria group. We're not going to be getting into that in this episode, but it is something that you can look into, or we might cover in other videos. But for now, again, it is a little bit much for just a single criterion for a single for a single achievement. We're also looking at ways of making some of this stuff a little bit easier for you, but we don't have that in place right yet. So a criterion we're going to create has the same thing, custom ID and name, but then you have to tie an action to it. And we're going to create a criterion. I changed that in some of my goofing around. We'll make that 10. Okay. So I've also tagged this name on so that we can see a distinction between criterion and criteria group later. But this criterion, we've given it an ID of closed 10 sales, and its name is close 10 sales. The action that it's tied to is close sale. And there's a rule, and this is important. What this rule means, this tells Ranked how this criterion should be measured. It's saying that the sum of every time the player or user has closed a sale should be greater than or equal to 10. Relatively straightforward. We're hopefully this is something that everybody can easily understand. There's documentation on the website, but that's what this is saying. This criterion is met when the user has a sum total of 10 or more close sale actions. Let's run that. There we go. We'll comment this out. Now, like I said, a criteria group is something that just holds criteria. And we will rename this again. So a criteria group holds criteria or nested criteria groups. Right now, this is just kind of a middleman and doesn't serve too much of a purpose here. It sits between the achievement and the criterion. But this criteria group does the same basic thing as the criterion underneath it, which is make sure that 10 sales have been made. So we're going to create it, and then at the same time we're going to attach the criterion that we created up here to the criteria group that we'll create here in a moment. So there's a method, attach criterion to criteria group, and you pass in the custom ID of each, and this is why I tag this on. They can have the same name because they're two different, the same custom ID because they're two different resources. But this just shows that there's a distinction here in the name. So I'm going to run this, and there we have the response. Now we have our criteria group set up, and we'll comment that out. Finally, we're going to make an achievement. I'm also going to go back. We're going to create an achievement. We're going to give it a silly name called Superseller. Like all these other resources, it has to have a unique custom ID and name within the resource type. We have to give it the custom criteria group ID. That's the one criteria group that belongs to this achievement. Again, there can be nested criteria groups, more than one more than one criterion. Lots of flexibility. Right now it's simple. We'll create this. I should point out the points defaults to 1. It can be anything that you want. I think just positive. We're considering going negative as well. There may be some use cases for that. But here, let's create it. Now we have our achievement created. Now, real quick, I'm going to switch back to our admin. If I go back to the dashboard, I just want to show you that we have an achievement here. There's the superseller we just created. Actions, close sale we just created. There should be no activities. Nothing's happened yet. No badges assigned. Criteria, there's the criterion that we created and the criteria group that we created. Finally, leaderboards. This is the one that we created. This should be created by default here in an upcoming release, but it's not in place yet. Players, we'll look at this here in a minute, and rewards we'll save for another day. But I want to go back up to achievements and just show, if we drill into this, here we can see some details about our achievement, and we see the criteria group. We can drill down into that. We can see that this criteria group has one criterion, and there are no nested criteria groups. Here's the action. It doesn't show the rule. That can get a little bit long in some cases, so we leave that out for now. But we can drill in. Here we can see the rule. We can see the details about this criterion. And finally, we can drill in to the action itself and see it here. All right, so I'm going to go back to, the dashboard here. Now, we want to set up our webhook. What we've done so far is we are sending requests to Ranked. And Ranked is responding to our requests. We're just managing resources. Nothing interesting really yet. Once we have our resources in place, the definitions for the criteria, for the achievements, so forth and so on that we're interested in, then we begin to report player, that's your user, activity. When they do something, when they perform an action, we send that information to Ranked. Now Ranked will take that information and see if there's anything interesting about it. Primarily it checks to see, have any achievements been earned? If so, it will respond via webhook to you to let you know that one of your players has earned a badge. So if we go back here, I'm going to click on edit for this game, and there we have the same properties, name, description, webhook URL, webhook secret. The secret is something that's used for validating that the requests that you get come from us. We will not send a webhook unless you have a webhook URL and secret. So use the secret if you want, but it's smart to use it just to validate that any request you get is from us. There's documentation in our documentation site that you can read a little bit more about that. Okay, now for testing, I'm using PipeDream. I'm going to copy this link. You can see it's waiting here for webhooks to come in. I'll paste it here, and I will give it super secret webhook secret. It has to be 16 or 20 characters long, I don't remember, but you need to put enough in. Now you would use that on your end to validate. So now we're set up for the webhook. I'll go back in here. I'm going to report activity. I'm going to report activity for, this is the custom ID for my player. This is the action that the player has performed. And this is the amount. There's more that you can pass in. If you don't pass in any amount, it defaults to 1. So I'm going to run this real quick, and what we're going to see is a couple of things. If I go back into our admin, we can see that we now have a new player. One of the things Rank does is it allows you to create a player on the fly. Sometimes that can be handy. Sometimes it may not be so smart, especially when it's related to time zones, which we can talk about another time. You can also see that there's been new activity. If I go down to players, there we see Travis is now a new player. We can see activities. Player Travis performed a close sale action once. So, but if we go to badges, we'll see that no badges have been earned. That's because in order to earn our only achievement, someone has to close 10 or more sales. So like I said, we can say how many times someone has performed a given action. So let's say 8. We've done it once. Now we're going to do it 8 more times. This is going to be recorded as a single activity, but the action itself will have been performed 9 times. So I'm going to send that. We come back in here, we refresh our badges, nothing. We go to activities, we see Travis 1, Travis 8, a total of 9. So finally, oh, and if we go and look here, we see that there's no activity, no webhook has been sent. So now let's just put us over the top. It can be exactly 10 or it can be more than 10. It doesn't matter. Here we'll do 10. I'm going to send it. If we go in here, we see the webhook. And if we open it up, oh, that's the context. There's the body. We see the superseller. We see, the type is a badge was earned. We see that the player is Travis. We see the date and time that it was earned. We see the amount of points that were earned in earning this achievement, and we see the custom achievement ID. If there are any rewards attached to it, that will be passed along as well. Okay. So one final thing is if we, I'm going to comment that out. If we look at our rankings, we see now that Travis, these are 0 based, so his rank is actually first. It's the top. Travis is ranked 0 in the all-time leaderboard. Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. We might build on this on another video where we begin to have maybe more complex criteria, multiple achievements with some overlap in some of the criteria. Real quick, maybe we'll show a different user. We'll just create a John Doe and we'll have him do 15 sales all at once. We submit that. We should see 2 badges have been issued, 2 new badges today. We should see the new webhook here with John Doe. And if we go and look at the leaderboard, it will be a tie. Well, it won't be a tie. I just submitted 15 more, but we see Travis is still ranked first. John Doe is now on the leaderboard and he's in second place. Now what we do, just FYI, what we do with ties is it's based on the time. So whoever scored 150 first will be placed higher than the person that scored it afterward. So there will be some ties, but it's on the microsecond. So it will be extremely rare if that ever happens. That's it. Please, again, hit us on Twitter at Ranked or me, Travis Elkins. You can also leave some comments here, and I hope that this has given you a bit of a better idea about how things work when you're using Ranked. Thank you. Have a great day.